Alright folks, Dan here, Hardwood Hollow Skills Channel, coming to you from the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. I'm just going to apologize up front if you hear me sniffling a little bit or coughing. I'm getting over a cold, just getting back on my feet, only to turn around and go back down for spine surgery next week. So I've been shooting as much video as I can so that I can do quite a bit of editing while I'm laid up and just sitting in my recliner. So this will be the last big project we're going to do. And let's get to it. This is going to be an unboxing and a welding project. Alright, I'll be back in 1 second. Alright, what we have here is from Tab and Slot, also known as weldtables.com. And this is their 2 foot by 3 foot, otherwise known as 24 deep by 36 wide, 36 inches, and it's called Tab and Slot because the same as the square that I previously welded, everything fits into these slots and everything has these tabs that you can see right there, and they all fit together to create the welding table, just like the square that we welded together in a previous project. Now, in the case of this square, I welded everything as it's supposed to be in the tabs and the slots, but for the purposes of this table, the steel that they use is guaranteed flat, so they call it Certi-Flat. So because I'm using a flux core welder, I don't want to mess up the tabletop by welding, so I believe I'm going to do all of my welds on the bottom down here. Now, this is just a tabletop. It does not come with legs or wheels or anything like that as part of the kit. At some point in the future, I may go ahead and add legs, and if I do that, they'll get added in at this corner, at each corner in here, and I'll use, this is a wood representation, but I'll use obviously steel, and they'll fit right up in the corner like that. And then at the other end, I'll decide whether I'm going to put feet or rollers on it. Likely it'll have rollers. But for now, I do have a welding table inside. It's a 3 by 4 foot welding table right here. It's kind of a mess right now because I was using it for some other stuff. But this particular welding table is not flat. It's been a welding table and or a workbench for 30 or 40 years. I got it out of a toothpaste factory, and the tabletop is nowhere near flat. So I want to thank Dave at weldtables.com for sending this out to me. There'll be a link down below. He was gracious enough to send it to me for this project, and all I had to pay was shipping, which was very, very generous of them. I'm still a relatively small channel trying to grow, and donations like this help out. So they're greatly appreciated. So thank you, Dave. And like I said, we'll tag everything in the comments below. All right, let me get reset up, and we'll get set up to weld. All of the parts on this are precision laser cut. So the edges are very, very clean. All the slots are nicely done. Just be cautious, there are oftentimes some sharp edges here and there, but they go together really nicely. The tabletop is cut the same way. Very nice, very clean. Everything, here's the slots that I was mentioning where the legs fit. Now traditionally you would put the parts together on the bottom and you would weld in the tops of these slots. To keep this top as clean as possible, like I said, because I'm using a flux core welder versus a true MIG, which has no shielding gas, the flux core leaves a lot more spatter. I understand it is a welding table, but you're not going to be able to do as clean of a weld with straight flux core wire feed versus true MIG or even dual shielded, which is where you're using a flux core and a shielding gas. So until such time as I can afford to purchase an argon tank to go with this welder, and a lot of the welding that I do I have to do outdoors, so the flux core is better for that anyway, we're just going to go ahead and stick with the flux core. So let's go ahead and get this cardboard out of the way, get this thing set up and ready to go. Alright, there is a certain amount of grit and grime on here that came from the factory, so we're going to get that cleaned off. I'm going to use a little bit of carburetor cleaner, so I'm going to take those gloves off, and we're going to put on some chemical safe gloves and a clean rag to get any oil off of there. What I have here is Berkebile gum cutter. This is great stuff, but it is very, very potent, so you want to protect yourself when you're using it. So I wear chemical safe gloves. These are just some rubber oil neoprene chemical safe, multiply. They do not offer electrical protection. Well, they'll offer some, but they're not rated for electrical protection. And of course, anytime you're using an aerosol spray like this, you do want to go ahead and put your safety glasses on to protect any blowback that might come in on your eyes. And while it looks dirty, it is a clean rag fresh out of the laundry. So we'll give this a good hosing down. Want to use in a well ventilated area. I happen to be under a carport tent, but I do have fans in the overhead going to keep the fumes from coming into the basement. Now let's go ahead and get this thing wiped off, cleaned up, and then we'll reassemble it for welding. I'm going to do 2 passes, once with the dirty side of the rag and once with the clean side. Now, like I said, I mentioned the rag was not was dirty, but it was clean out of the laundry. But look how dirty it is now compared to the other side. So let's go ahead and give it another hosing and wipe it down again. If I did not have the fans behind me blowing the fumes away from me, I would be wearing my respirator. Alright. Get the steel nice and clean. Now this is going to be the underside. So now we got to go ahead and wipe down the parts before we weld them together. Alright, everything's clean. So we'll put these gloves back on. These are, as I mentioned in another video, the Harbor Freight. They were $3.99 during Black Friday. I bought 3 pair of them. Put a pair in the truck, a couple pair down here in the shop. And we're going to be testing these out. They're not welding gloves, they're just general work gloves. So remember, like I said in the other video, the backs of these will burn, and the fingers and palms are not super thick, so they'll give you just a minimum amount of heat protection. So let's get these reassembled here. first. Get everything lined up. There we go. Do this edge. Get everything lined up. And we'll do this edge. Alright, everything is lined up down in its tabs. Don't want it to warp. So I believe I'm going to clamp the corners and tack them, and then clamp the centers and tack them. And I've got one more here for right here. Alright, pull that back just a little bit. Alright, so this end is tacked down. Now we'll bring the welder in. Show you what our setup is. Alright, today we're using my Hobart Handler 210. That's 210 amps. It has a, I believe it's a 30% duty cycle. But what we're going to be running, you look, most welders, most wire feed welders like this, if you lift up the door on the side where your roll goes, you'll notice this chart. Now I'm using welding steel, I'm welding flux core, and I'm using a 35 thousandths wire. So if I follow that over where it says up here at the top 3/16, which is the thickness of the steel I'm welding, come down to where my finger is, it says to use a setting of 5 on the penetration and 35 on the feed. So what that means is on the front here it says to use a setting of 5, which is your penetration, and it's saying 35 for wire feed speed. So we'll give that a try, and if we need to, we can go ahead and modify that on the fly. So off camera I decided to add 2 more clamps, one at each corner. So at that far corner there's one also, right there and right there, in addition to the 3 that I already had on it. So let's go ahead and get with the, we're going to be tack welding this corner right there first. I'm going to tack it on the outside, because at some point if I put legs on, like I said, they're going to go on the inside and I want that clean. So all my welding is going to be on the outside of that frame, and then all the way down my welds will be on the outside, except in here, which I'll tack these in from the inside. Alright, for safety gear today, because we are running flux core wire, I will be wearing my Miller respirator. I'll also be wearing my welding gloves. I already have my welding jacket on, as you can see, heavy duty boots, and of course welding helmet. Alright, there we go. I'm going to do a tack weld right in the corner. Alright, good tack weld. Now we're going to come over and do this corner. Get in there close and you see my tack weld. Like I said, Matt mentioned about the spatter, which comes from your flux core wire. You're always going to have more spatter with flux core than you will with standard MIG, which is metal inert gas. This does not have the inert gas. The wire itself is hollow and has flux in it, and that's why you get the black coloration in the spatter as well. Alright, I'm going to set the camera up and I'm just going to walk around and start doing my welds, and you can follow along. Alright, now that those tacks are done, I'm going to go ahead and move. Oh, I need to tack the center, and then we're going to move the planks around the other side. Alright, now we're going to move the plank to the other side. Alright, now up here in the center, I don't have a way of easily clamping it down to get it nice and flat with the clamps that I have, so I'm going to show you an alternative method for doing that. Alright, this bar I have, this is a piece of 1-inch square tubing. I'm going to take this clamp off. And we're going to go ahead and take this clamp off. And we're going to take this one off. And this one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set this bar directly over the top of that center support, and we're going to clamp it down tight. We're going to come over here and do the same thing. And that will push down in the center, and being that this is square tubing, it's much stronger than just a regular flat bar, and that will put tension pushing that down tight. And if I look all the way across here, I cannot see any air whatsoever, so that tells me that this plate here is pulled tight against this one. Let's get our safety gear back on and get the center tacked up. Alright, let me move it down, get the other side, and then we'll come back to you. Alright, now I've got all my spot welds done. Each of these corners has a spot weld inside and all the way around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back in and do a stitch weld, and I'm going to come out to the edge here. I'm going to do that on both sides, here and here, and I'll do a stitch in the middle so that everywhere along here there'll be contact with the table. And by doing all these tack welds that I've done, it's not going to pull away. But I'm going to alternate where I weld so that I'm not putting too much heat in any one spot and warping the metal. So let me get my PPE back on, and we'll start doing these stitch welds. Like I said, they're all going to be on the outside. They're not going to be in any of the four corners on the inside. Let's just put it that way. How I fully do the stitch welds will kind of materialize as I go along and I see what I'm doing. So you can see where I put this one on off camera and got the spot welds in there. So we're going to take all the clamps off. We don't need them anymore, and we'll just finish welding it. Alright, little welding trick I've learned over the years. They make it both in the spray and in the tub like this. This gel, nozzle gel, you take your welding nozzle. This is especially important with flux core because it's so much dirtier. You take your nozzle and you just dip it down inside this material. It coats the inside of your nozzle and prevents all that crap from sticking to it. You still have to clean your nozzle out periodically. You still have to take it apart and do your normal maintenance, but you can go further between having to do that maintenance with using this gel. Like I said, it's also available in a spray form. The spray form can actually also be sprayed onto the metal itself, which will help prevent the slag from sticking to the metal. Alright, I don't know how well it's translating to video because of the bright light, but I'm going to bring you in close here. See how close we can get you so that you can see what I'm doing. And when I come in here, and now I'm not going to strike an arc. In fact, I'm going to take my ground clamp off so I won't strike an arc. But when I come into this metal, you can either push or pull with wire feed. They teach you generally to push. I come from a long line of stick welders where you're mostly pulling. But what I'm doing is I'm alternating up and down like this so that I get my arc, my puddle of metal to jump between the high side and the bottom side like this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, in order to fully bond these two pieces of steel together properly. If you don't get penetration in the top and bottom, you're going to have what they call a floating weld, and it's not going to be grabbing the steel correctly, and you're not going to bond those two pieces of steel. Because what you're doing, in essence, is you're taking this little wire right here, and as it's heating up, it's with the electrical current, it's melting between these two pieces of steel. So you need to get that wire right into that gap and bond those two pieces of steel together, or literally melt them together. And you do that by alternating top and bottom like this all the way down as you weld. You have to control your speed to make sure you get a large enough puddle that's actually going to bond the two pieces of steel together as well. If you just push, you can actually push and get the weld to go in there, but it's not going to bond the two sides together as well. So we'll get hooked back up here and we'll get her finished up. Okay folks, I haven't cleaned the welds up yet with the wire wheel, but you can see I did all of the corners all the way around, and these beads here inside and out are the areas where the tabs and slots were. So everywhere there's a tab and a slot, I did a weld. You can see what I was referring to with the dirtiness, with the amount of spatter and carbon marks from the flux core in that welding. And then I'll flip it over and you'll see the other side where it'll be nice and clean. So the only spot where I messed up was on this inside corner. I had said I was going to leave the inside corners unwelded, and I did on 3 of them, but this one I got in a hurry and wound up welding that inside corner. So if I decide to put legs in here, I'll just wind up having to go in there with my die grinder and clean that weld out, square that corner up, and then weld the leg right in there. No problem. So there you go. I'll flip it over here and let you see the other side. Alright guys, here's the finished product. I brought it into the garage. I set it on top of the welding table that I mentioned that has the 1/4-inch top, but it's a little bit curved from years and years of use. So here's this 2x3 foot tab and slot welding table. So you can see how the frame sets on the table. There's the frame where we welded. You can see some of the smoke there still. And then I welded it, like I said, on the bottom. When I flipped it over, you can see where I just polished off the burn marks using my angle grinder with a Scotch-Brite head on it. Works very, very well. And of course it's not in this drawer. But anyway, trust me, that's what I used. Worked very well. Polished it off. Kept it certified level because I didn't take any metal off. I just cleaned off the surface. So there you go. The whole welding table. This is Dan, Hardwood Hollow Skills channel. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and share it. And go ahead and go over and check out weldtables.com. You can also do a search for tab and slot and you'll come right up on their website. So again, thanks to Dave for sending that out. Dave, sorry for the delay in getting it done. As I mentioned, I had spine surgery in December and didn't get to do it before the surgery. So there it is. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm out.